This is the FlSun S1 Pro, and this just might be the best 3D printer I think I've ever used. Yes, I have all the printers. I have a Bamboo Lab P1S, I've had the P1, X1, A1, I've even had most Prusa's up to modern day. And I have to say that the FlSun S1 Pro is probably my favorite printer so far for a variety of reasons. And in this video, I'm going to tell you all the things that I love about this printer, some of the things that I've discovered that I don't like about this printer, where it fits in the price point battle of about $1,200, and how it compares to other printers in that same price point, like the K2 Plus, for example, or even, I guess the X1 Carbon probably. So let's get into the video real quick, and let me tell you about all the things that I like and don't like. Oh, and by the way, that's also one of my favorite printers, the T1 Pro, and it's stacked on top of the S1 Pro because, well, I just might as well tell you, one of my favorite things about this printer is how sturdy it is. It is absolutely a behemoth of a printer. It's strong, it doesn't wiggle around, it doesn't move, and it's just built like a tank. And what's really cool is you can stack your deltas to the ceiling. We'll get to that later. The coolest thing about the S1 Pro is the fact that it is so versatile. Whether you're doing PLA, TPU, nylons, polycarbonate, ABS, glass-filled, carbon fiber, etc., you name the material and this printer can print it. I've literally not run across any material that it cannot print. With a bed that goes up to 120 degrees Celsius, and it does it rather quickly. The extruder on this printer is a dual gear drive setup that we've become accustomed to. Inside the tool head is all the parts for input shaping, for filament sensor, etc. Below the extruder, we have a hot end that is somewhat familiar. It looks similar to a Rapido, if you've seen a Rapido. The difference is that they claim it has a 110 millimeters per second squared maximum volumetric flow rate, and I'm likely to believe them because the speeds that I'm getting off this printer are literally double of any other printer on the market that I've seen so far. What takes you an hour on a Bamboo will take you 30 minutes on the S1 Pro. Right now, I am printing glass-filled ABS, and if you know anything about glass-filled ABS, it's a very brittle material. It needs a stable environment inside the enclosure. It also needs to be dried. And one of the cool things about this printer is just that. This printer has a built-in filament dryer that goes up to 60 degrees Celsius, and you get to set the time. It could be 4 hours, 3 hours, 6 hours, whatever you would like. And so before I did this print in glass-filled ABS, I put the filament in there and I let it dry for about 6 hours. That way I know when print time comes, not only is the filament dry, but it is keeping it dry during the printing process. Be wary of the profiles. While very good, it is highly advisable that you go through and do a little tuning and make sure that you don't need any additional cooling, or you don't need to slow the volumetric flow rate down a little bit so that it's more reasonable. It's okay to go slow. Every print I throw at this thing, I look at the time and I'm like, wow, it's only gonna take an hour and a half. Wow, it's only gonna take 2 hours. It's absolutely bonkers when you look at this printer versus the K2 Plus. The K2 Plus has been kind of hit or miss for me. Lately, the last day or two, I've had really good luck with it, and that's because I started building my own printer profiles for it. With my own printer profiles and my own start and end G-code, I'm starting to have a lot better luck with the K2 Plus. But out of the box experience, the S1 Pro and the T1 Pro worked absolutely flawless for me. Again, there might be some little tweaking you need to do, but the printer is going to print straight out of the box and you're not going to have any problems. And let me tell you, after you just spent $1,200 or $1,299 in the case of the K2 Plus, the last thing you want to be doing is tweaking on the printer, adjusting belt tension and going back and forth with, customer service. What do I do with this? Why am my first layer not working? You don't want none of that nonsense. We're in a price point now where you can absolutely insist that is not okay. So let me bring you over and get you a closer look at the printer itself and show you some of the things that I like and that I don't like about it. First and foremost, we got this big old shiny touchscreen. Hi. This touchscreen is about as close to an iPad as I've ever seen on a 3D printer. I'm trying to show you something. Let's see, like models. You can see that the speed and refresh rate of this screen is absolutely in a class of its own. I've never seen a printer have a screen, number one, this big, and number two, this responsive. This screen is absolutely amazing. From the screen, you can do all kinds of things, like you can turn the lights off inside of it if you want, if it's bothering you. You can also see the spool weight. Now, I didn't catch this in the first video that I did for this printer, but yes, it has a spool weight inside of it. And if I open this up and I put my thumb underneath of it, you'll see that it's actually weighing in real time the weight of the spool. Now, it's not adjustable and you can't like zero it out like you can on a scale. But what's cool is it basically is counting a full kilo as 100%, 50%, and 25% respectively. It does have this beautiful glass door that keeps this sealed and closed. You can feel the heat inside of here. It is drying the filament. Speaking of filament drying, it does go up to 60 degrees, and I just turned it back on because it had shut off. But you can see it gives you a humidity reading from inside the chamber, and it tells you its current temperature. This does get up to 60 relatively quickly, and it does hold the temperature just fine. Right here, you can adjust the time. If you want it to be 6 hours, or I don't know how long it would let you do it for, 23 hours. Maximum 24 hours, it says. So you can do up to 24 hours on here of dry time, which is absolutely mostly okay for most filaments, I would think. Up along here, the top of this panel, you can see the current nozzle temperature, 270 degrees, and 110 on the bed. And like I said, this bed goes up to 120, and the nozzle goes up to 350 degrees. This hot end has a maximum volumetric flow rate, as I mentioned before, of 110 millimeters per second squared. And this is doing glass fiber ABS. And that little color difference you see there is actually ran out of a spool and had to move to another spool. But you can see on this, absolutely beautiful, perfect cooling, perfect layer lines, great layer stacking. Super happy with the quality of this. Now, this does not have an active heated chamber, so it does have right up here, see if I can get it in the camera here. This is an activated charcoal filter. Of course, I don't know when you would use this, because during ABS printing, you don't want this on because it's going to pump all your hot air outside. So that's not ideal. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe after the print's finished, you would run this to evacuate all of the VOCs that are inside the chamber, possibly. I'm not really sure. The build volume is 350 by 350 by 420. It goes all the way up into here. Now, that is the advertised build volume. My experience is it's closer to about 320 by 320. It says 350 by 350 by 420, and my experience is you get about 330 maybe down here at the bottom, maybe 340. But as it goes up, the build volume on a Delta is actually in a cone configuration. So the higher up you get, the less X and Y distance you have. So you have to be kind of conscious of that, and modern day slicers do not really account for that. So there's people that run into problems where it's basically going outside the build volume and it will not warn you in the slicer. So it's very important to kind of give yourself a little wiggle room here. So basically, I don't go over 330, maybe, I try to stay 320 to 330 down here on the build volume. That way I know when I get to the top, I'm not cutting into that cone shape. But this thing will print a perfect wall and stack a layer all the way to the top of this thing, and it will be absolutely flawless. And I think this is showing you exactly the quality that it can do. It's absolutely amazing, outstanding even. Again, it's got glass doors, which is very nice, and these doors don't just look nice. If you push on them, they actually seal and keep all the air in. There is nothing coming out of here. This is a nice sealed enclosure for doing high temp printing. Also, it keeps the noise way down. Now, while the new S1 Pro, the cooling fan is about a third as loud as the original S1, the motors on this printer are kind of loud, and you can probably hear it. Now, it's nothing crazy. It's not over 50 decibels at 3 feet. They advertise 50 decibels at 3 feet, and it's at about 48. It's actually less than a Bamboo Lab X1 Carbon, believe it or not, but it's not the noise or the loudness, it's the pitch. These have closed loop stepper motors, and what that means is they have their own control boards on the back of the stepper drivers, on the stepper motors themselves, and it does produce like that old school kind of whining sound that we used to hear from 3D printers way back in the day, like on Ender 3s, for example. Now, Again, it's not that it's loud, it's that it's the pitch. The pitch is very loud. Like your dog might hear it kind of loud, like squeaky. It sounds like a robot printing, and that's exactly what it is. Outside of that, I really don't have a lot of bad to say about this printer. The frame is built out of composite aluminum. So this is like like the same thing that we see on the Creality K2 Plus. It's like a forged alloy frame. It's absolutely massive, thick and beefy and strong. And like I said, I have stacked this T1 Pro up here. I print on these printers together all the time, and it does not even wiggle. This printer does not even wiggle. At 70 pounds, this printer does not even move a hair. So let's talk about the slicer for just a little bit. I'm not gonna do a screen recording. I'm just gonna show you what I got on my screen right here. So one thing about this printer that is really nice is the slicer is very familiar. This is normal Orca slicer. Nothing too special about it. It is called FlSun Slicer, and the reason for that is because they have integrated their cloud functionality into this. So when you go to the device tab, it's not just your normal fluid or clipper interface, although that's what this looks like. If you look over here, you'll see I can actually switch between my printers. So there's the T1 Pro, and I can even jump over into the V400 that's sitting over here on my desktop. And this is not normal for Orca Slicer. This is something that FlSun added to this printer. When we go to the home page, you can see that we actually log into our FlSun account, and then we add our printers to it. And again, this gives us direct interface with the FlSun printers, not just here, but anywhere in the world. So I can start a print from these printers anywhere in the world. I do not have to be on my local area network. One thing I love about this slicer, again, is it's just vanilla Orca slicer with a little tiny bit of FlSun sprinkled over the top. This is a stark comparison to the Creality print that is an absolute nightmare for me on Macintosh. It is the worst slicer I've ever seen given with any printer ever. FlSun did just enough to add some functionality to this and to get nice, quality, reliable results, and the fact that you can still use it over the cloud, you can use it over your local area network, and it has a bunch of built-in, pre-done files that do a great job. This printer just works great. The slicer works even better. And like I said, because it's vanilla Orca slicer, it's all these things that we're already super familiar with. Not too much has changed, and I absolutely love it. All right, let's talk a little bit about the app. So this is FlSun World. And this is a cloud-capable application that they recently just took outside of beta and now have it in the App Store. Now, this app, again, will rival anything the Bamboo Lab has done. In my personal opinion, it's a little bit better because as far as I know, here you can start prints from the phone. You can actually take G-code from FlSun World, and you can upload it right through your phone, right to the printer anywhere in the world. That's pretty cool. It's got AI detection, so it detects spaghetti, problems. It also detects if something's already on the bed. So if you start a print and something's on the bed from previous, it will warn you, and you can go and review the camera and say, okay, yeah, there's a problem or there's not a problem. For example, that little piece of filament right there might trigger it, and I can either say, yeah, go ahead, pass it, or no, just wait, and then I'll have to wait till I get home, I guess, to clear it. The controls are all very familiar. You got X and Y and Z. You got different, amounts of 1 millimeter, 10 millimeters of movement. You got your full fan controls right here, and then you got presets for heat up. So if you want to heat this up when you get out of bed in the morning before you get in the shower, you can absolutely do that and heat soak the printer, and then it will be ready to go when you're ready to go. Again, the T1 Pro has got a great, nice, clear camera. You can control the light on it. You can also go full screen on it if you want. Let me show you. So this is all my printers I have hooked up to it right now, the T1 and the S1. So let's click into the S1. You'll see the current temperatures on the nozzle, and while it's loading. Now, my only complaint about this app is this right here. So the camera is filming in portrait, but the camera app right here is in landscape. And I'm gonna try to maybe like turn the printer and then rotate it in the firmware, but that is a little annoying. Now this is a high resolution camera and it makes great pictures and it even does great time lapses. The problem is I hate that there's big old borders on the side. But outside of that is exactly the same as the T1 Pro that I just showed you here in the app. Keep in mind too, it does tell you how much filament you have left. So basically 100% is like 750 to 1,000 grams, and then like 500 to 750 is 75%. Under 500 grams is under 50%, obviously, and then under 25%. So they have some standards here to give you an idea of how much filament is loaded into the printer. Now, again, this is just on the S1 Pro. I don't believe the T1 Pro has that feature. Also here, it keeps all of your prints loaded up here in the history. So you can go back and print something that you've already printed. You can review your time lapses. For example, this is a time lapse that I did on the T1 Pro. Again, this is a really inexpensive Delta printer, and it is just as fast as the S1 Pro, and that time lapse is actually pretty high quality. You can do smooth time lapses. You can set all this up in the slicer if you wanted like it to stop and take a picture, that kind of thing. But that's a pre-sliced file off the SD card that I started from the phone. So yeah, that's about it. Again, great app. Great slicer, really good slicer. Firmware for me has been really good. I really don't have a lot of complaints. One little gripe that I have is the changing the filament on this is kind of a pain, because you're supposed to cut it down here above the tool head, and then you pull it out through the top, and then you reload the filament through the top. There is no automatic loading mechanism that feed it down to the nozzle. That would have been sweet, like a first stage feeder off of a like an AMS or something, to feed the filament all the way down the tool head would have been absolutely amazing. The other thing I haven't quite figured out yet is I know there's a filament sensor here, but it seems like there's another filament sensor in the tool head, because the filament will go past the sensor here, and it will go all the way down almost into the tool head, but not quite, and then it stops. So it's got to have a filament sensor in both, I would think. This again has input shaping and all that stuff built into the tool head, so you don't got to worry about any of that. It does have CPAP cooling. It does work very well. And again, for CPAP cooling, this thing is about 20% as loud as my V400 with CPAP, or even the T1, to be completely honest. The screen for me has been really good. The only so I mentioned the filament swapping is kind of a pain because of the method that you have to do. You have to cut it, pull it out, put the new one in, feed it all the way down, and then on the screen you have to say filament, load, set the temperature, and then go. It will get up to temperature, it will feed the filament, it'll purge that whole line out right above where you cut it, and then you got to chase the new one down inside of it until it grabs it. It's not ideal. It's not the best way to do it. I would rather it just went down fast and yanked it back out, but that's a minor gripe, to be completely honest, and you could fix it in the firmware if you wanted to mess with the macro. Number two problem with this printer that drove me crazy is firmware updates. So it does over-the-air firmware updates. My understanding is FlSun's rather new to this concept, but it's not just me. I know other people that have had the same exact issue. If you're in the middle of a long print and a firmware update comes, even though you're saying you're not going to run the firmware update, if that firmware update comes and shows up on the screen, it will stop that printer in its tracks. And I don't mean it just pauses it. I mean it shuts off. So that is a problem. Now, I've reported that back to FlSun, and they say they are working on it. My understanding, though, is it's been doing that since the S1. So we'll see how they do. But again, it's a minor inconvenience. They are not uploading new firmware every other day. The firmware is really, really good. Again, if I had it my way, I would never update this again, because it just, for me, you do the calibration and it just prints. Now this printer, because it's a Delta, we don't have to do calibration before every print. We don't. It has auto tensioning belts, right? So it keeps tension on the belts automatically. The bed probing is the best in the business, and because it's such a rigid printer, the beautiful thing about Delta is, just like my V400, I've only ever leveled that bed once. This printer is on the same trajectory. I set it up here on the desk, I ran input shaping, I leveled the bed one time, and then I leave it alone. I also did the motor calibration, but then I leave it alone. And when you start a print in the start G code, basically it just runs the tool head down, pulls over to the side, heats up, and then it runs its purge line and starts printing. It doesn't have to do all the bed probing and the shaking and the input shaping. The reason the printers have to do that is because there's inconsistencies in the printer. Bamboo Lab, for example, nothing wrong with those printers. I'm just saying, The reason it does input shaping every time, the reason it does bed leveling every single time, is because there are inconsistencies in the printer that occur when it's in different temperatures, different environments, different times of day. There's a million factors that can make a printer's bed be a little bit different, can make the belt tension a little bit different. So Bamboo Lab has basically, to ensure a perfect print every time, has just run through that process every single print, basically. And that's just, again, to make sure that everything is perfect. This Delta, because it's so rigid, because it's put together so well, because the firmware works so well, you don't have to worry about it on this printer. So if you want to grab one of these printers, I will put a link down below. It is an affiliate link. I am an affiliate for FlSun. This printer for $1,299 or $1,200, sometimes you can find it a little bit less. This printer, for single color, I would buy all day and night and twice on Sunday before I would buy that K2. Now, while I got most of the problems with the K2 worked out, the slicer is an absolute piece of garbage, and the firmware is problematic. And the fact that I'm having to fix the firmware so that my K2 Plus will actually print is absolute nonsense. The FlSun has just worked out of the box. Now, if you don't know me, I have a pretty decent sized TikTok account. I'm a 3D printer influencer on TikTok. And I'll tell you, I have sold many of these printers to many of my compadres, and they will attest it. Go over to TikTok, follow me, and go check out some of my friends. The T1 Pro and the S1 Pro, I haven't had one person come to me and say, bro, you recommended this printer and it wasn't awesome. They are all singing its praises. Now, asterisk, I'm not talking about the S1. Not talking about the S1. The S1 came out about a year and a half ago. We all know that it had problems. I was not part of that. I did not get one of these printers when they came out. I got the S1 Pro, which is the updated version that fixed and addressed all of those things on that printer. So I can't speak to the S1. I know they had problems. I know some people are pissed off, but I will tell you, update the new firmware, update the new slicer. My understanding is even S1 users are having far better success. In fact, I'm going to say they've basically remedied all the problems by putting out good slicer profiles and updating the firmware. So if you have an S1 sitting in your closet and you're mad and pissed off, do me a favor, take it out, upload the new firmware, upload the slicer, and thank me later. So anyways, you guys got any good questions? Let me know down in the comments below. Like, share, and follow, guys. I'm going to put out content every single week until I am a superstar like Joel Telling. I'm persistent, and believe that. Take that to the bank. Anyways, thanks for watching, everybody. I appreciate all the comments, like, shares, and follows, and I'll see you fools on the next one. See ya.